It was my first week of shooting on a new job. And, I get all the costumes approved, which means I try them on the actors
Yeah.
before I get them approved.
Yeah.
And that time when I try it on the actors is usually like our safe place to where I find out if they like something or they don't like something.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to ever push to put something an actor doesn't like on them because like it would affect the performance and your relationship with them. So you have to live in this world of pleasing everybody.
Yeah.
So that had already happened. So you think you're doing good. You have like all your costumes prepped. I'm just on the truck to make sure everything goes okay, because then they're going to be on set soon.
Yeah.
And then the actress like walks in on the truck crying that she did not like the dress and didn't remember trying it on. And, I'd already gotten approved by like producers and directors before this moment. And it's going to be shooting in I think like 20 minutes. It's supposed to be on camera.
Oof. On today's show, costume designer Ashley Heathcock talks the inner workings of the wardrobe department from her experience in film, commercials, and now network television. thepracticalfilmmaker.com. I'm your host, Tanya Musgrave, and today we get to dive into the world of wardrobe with costume designer Ashley Heathcock, whose work can be seen in Magnum PI, Big Sky, Venom, Bright, The Orville, and the upcoming Music Box film, Please Baby Please. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, this is going to be fun because I have not had anybody in wardrobe on this podcast yet. And so buckle up because I got a lot of questions.
Okay. I feel so honored.
Yes.
For all of us costume people out there.
Yeah, you got to represent, no pressure.
Yeah, I know.
So let's start with how you got to where you are now.
All right. It's a pretty lengthy story, so I'll try to sum it up. But I studied fashion. I didn't study film or costume design. I do know that that's available now for people in college. And it probably was when I was in college too, but I was drawing clothes in high school and someone suggested fashion design. So that's what I did. And then I graduated from a university in London, met some extraordinary people there, and then wound up in Austin, Texas, post-college, worked for a local fashion designer, and then eventually worked for a local designer in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And it was at the time when the New Orleans film scene had started to get pretty big.
Okay.
So I was hearing about it around town, like Treme was shooting there and other movies. And then it was like the first time I was like, wait a second, I wonder if all these skills I have would transfer over to who is ever putting clothes on these actors.
Yeah.
And then I sent my resume to probably every production email and heard nothing, as we all know how that goes sometimes.
I gotta love those cold emails.
And I was like, I don't understand. I have like a fashion degree. Not everybody's going to have that. And, it's just they get so many emails. So I randomly met a producer in the city, and I knew he was a producer for some reason. And he was impressed that I knew he was. He was like, how did you pick up on that? I'm like, I don't know. And then I was like, so tell me, how do you get in? How do you get into this industry? Is it all who you know? And he said, it is kind of like that. Sometimes you do just need an invitation. And he did not know me at all, but I was like, could you please, let your costume person know that I would love to be an intern, not even a paid position.
Yeah.
And he somehow talked to the costume supervisor I don't know if he had a twist her arm or not, but she was open to interviewing me. Yeah. And that was my first interview. And that was 12 years ago.
How did that go?
I was so nervous.
What do you say? What do you say in that kind of thing? Like in order to get your actual first break onto a set? Because I looked at your IMDb, you started on some pretty good stuff.
Some of it, some you never heard of too.
I mean, don't we all?
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, she was very experienced for local supervisor, and had worked her way up too. Yeah. And I brought my little resume in, which had my education on there and some internships. And she was impressed with, I think I almost got onto Project Runway, almost,
Ooh, okay.
always a bridesmaid.
Yeah.
And that was on there because I had made it down to like top 50. And I think that was like the biggest conversation starter we had.
Mm,
And then she was just like, I like you. I'm going to take a chance on you. And
nice.
we'll teach you everything that we can about how this business works and how it works in costumes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
she also taught me a lot about unions too.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
how to join and basically things to look out for when you're on other union shows and you might be taken advantage of as a PA. And so I went from intern to costume PA
Hmm.
and then to seamstress to fitter to ager dyer, set costumer, key costumer, assistant costume designer. Now I'm a costume designer.
Okay, okay. So for those who are just starting off on this, like, can you give me an example of like the different terms? Like you said like costumer and like ager dyer and that kind of a thing.
Sure.
I think you had mentioned stylist before. What are the
Mhm.
differences between all of these these terms?
Good question. I mean, a lot of the times you will do some of the same things a stylist will do, which I guess the biggest difference for me is probably like the type of media it is. Like if it's a commercial or music video, you're more likely to be doing stylist work.
Okay.
Mostly like the biggest difference for me, and I could be wrong, and I bet other people have like different definitions for this,
Yeah, yeah.
but for me, costumers and costume designers work towards a story, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot more behind the character.
Mm.
And then as a stylist, I think it is really more of like a visual a goal that you're trying to achieve with like other people there, like the art director there. And that's more of like print work or short media like music video
Okay.
where like it's more about the imagery than the story.
Okay.
So
Okay.
to me that's a major difference.
Is that does that in, I'm guessing that like stylist is more like you're like more just kind of like shopping for the right look and costume designing. I mean, are you
Mhm.
actually designing? Like, I mean, you like you
Right.
graduated with fashion, so like, are you creating these pieces? Are you like, or just modifying or?
A lot of modifying.
Okay.
Sometimes you do create things, you do design something, from like that part is what I love,
Yeah.
from like sketch to actualization and it's on a body, like that's
Wow.
very fun and you get to use all of like those creative skills. But a lot of times you kind of are curating. And when you do that, you do everything from like shop it, you dye it, you can change the color, you
Mhm.
change the fit of it, you might change out the collar, like you do so many different modifications to make it right for the character. So
Yeah.
that's still kind of fun too. And then normally, a stylist, you're probably, going more for like whatever the look of the shoot is than just than building the character.
Okay.
But we still steam clothes. We still do a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
We still go in there and last look.
Yeah.
And then, the length of the job is different too. Stylist gigs are pretty short. Costumer jobs could be short and they could be like 6 months. Some films,
Oh,
6
wow.
months. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Like big budget movies. That's like half a year.
Yeah. I had a very random question like pop into my head. So, what happens to these clothes afterwards? Because I had a friend who worked at a place that took all of the old props and
Oh,
that kind of
so
thing,
cool.
and like they sold. It was a warehouse that sold old props and stuff like that. Is there something like that for costumers, or do they just like, well, it's Goodwill and that kind of a thing, or are they kept? Do they go to the production? Like, do you handle that? Do you have to wash them and like get rid of them, or what
Time.
happens to them?
Yeah, sometimes I am a part of rap. So like we have big rental houses, like props has as well,
Okay.
costume rental houses, especially if you're like on a period shoot.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
might
yeah.
do like a big rental pool. So
Yeah.
then all of your rentals will go back to that rental house. But whatever normally how it goes is like whatever's purchased for the studio, it will like it's their property. And
Yeah.
sometimes they have like the Fox lot has their own costume shop. So it could go back there,
Oh,
you know.
okay, okay.
And Sony has one. But sometimes on smaller stuff when it's a smaller company, like an indie film, they might sell it off or they might donate it for a tax write-off.
Oh,
So
okay.
it kind of varies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I've had stuck in my head that I learned from a costume designer, I'm sure people are tired of this single fact that I know. I'm sure they're begging me to learn something else. It's like the rule of 3 textures, and I see it everywhere now. Like, and when I look at costume, it's just combining at least 3 different textures, like metal, fur, leather, cotton, everything. Is there a rule of the trade that you've kind of picked up like that? Something that you always look for?
Oh, I think everyone has maybe like uh, a signature to what they do. Like different costume designers, you
Ooh,
might,
could you give me an example?
well, for me, you're going to always see texture, and I happen to be wearing something with texture.
Yeah.
I also mix a lot of patterns
Okay.
too,
Yeah.
if I'm allowed to.
Yeah.
It depends on the story, and the job. And then other designers, maybe they only do sci-fi, which is a pretty cool category. I feel like sometimes work begets work. So like you have to maybe start out in sci-fi to keep getting them. But as a growing designer, I don't know if I have the luxury of like choice, I kind of have to see like what presents itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It says in your bio that you honed the aging and dying process on Dawn of Planet of the Apes. And we actually have a listener question who asked for some good tips for that. So I don't know, give us your best. Is it like an industry secret? Are there lots of those?
Oh,
I don't
I
know.
love to share. I
Yeah.
don't, I think our secrets are always evolving,
Hmm.
meaning like you're always going to pick up something new from somebody else, and maybe it's a different way of doing the same job.
Yeah.
So like I love to share because it's, I'm going to learn from other people on the way.
Yeah.
But aging and dying, right. So there's the dye work where you can change the color, many different things. And that has a lot to do with like what a garment is made of, textiles,
Hmm.
what's natural, what's not natural. And there's different dyes for different types of textiles. That's like a skill all on its own. You have to be really good with color, especially if it's already a base color. If it's not white and it's yellow and you're trying to, push it red, you kind of have to think about all these different colors you can add to an existing color to make it red.
Hmm.
And then there's the aging section, which is, making something look lived in or making something look like 100 years old, and trying to make it be as authentic as possible. And I always suggest to any young ager dyer to look at reference photos of things that do actually read that period or that age, or if it's burned, like, try to find fibers that have been burned. And then I probably do things, more like of a natural pattern. You want it to look real, and there's a lot of shading involved. And I'd say, you can get this airbrush kit at Harbor Freight for like $90, and it has a compressor and an airbrush. And yeah, it's not the highest quality, but it worked just fine for like learning on it.
Yeah.
And if you're ever working in, like I've worked in a lot of small towns randomly,
Yeah.
and you need an airbrush, all of a sudden, there's always a Harbor Freight. You can just, there's not always an art store, but there is always a Harbor Freight.
So it's paint, like a lot of the aging and this stuff. It's not like somebody just like went and ran it under a car or something like that. I don't know.
It's so funny. I mean, I've heard stories of like directors doing that on, maybe some of their first projects, and then they're like, oh Lord, and then there's tire marks, because that would happen. You have to kind of sand it, and you have to think about when you put it on, where your fingers are hitting, and like the weight of things in your pocket over a long period of time. So when you're aging it down, you might, put weights in it, and then you might hit it with some sandpaper. And then, once you brush back some of the fibers, then you probably come in and put some shading, and then you come in and put some highlights.
Wow.
So it's like a multimedia process, which is really fun, and really hands-on. But
so how long does one piece usually take? Like the process of it.
It depends on what you're trying to achieve. For like general, like let's just say we want someone to look really down, and like maybe they haven't, washed their clothes in a week or so. That doesn't take very long.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're trying, I worked on a project where like they dug someone up and
Oof.
yeah, that had been in the ground in Louisiana, mold
Oof. Yeah.
for a long time. And so I had to make this gown look like it had been in there. And that's, you got to use your imagination because there's
Yeah.
not really any images of that. So,
No, or ones that you would want to see. No.
or ones you want to look at. Yeah. A lot of that's like pulling out the saturation. You're like wanting the colors to fade,
Yeah.
and if it's silk, it would start to dry right. You have to kind of make that effect. And then,
Wow.
on that particular project, I made something that looked like mold. So it had a little bit of a texture to it.
Wow. Wow.
With flocking, that the flocking things that people use, I guess, when they're making small models of houses, and it might be how the grass is made. It's like this
Oh,
fibers
no.
that yeah, it's you'll find it at Joann's. So I got some of that, and then I just airbrushed it to like the right colors and stuff
Wow.
look like mold.
Wow, that is so cool. I always thought it would be really fun to just like assist in like wardrobe costuming, like art, that whole entire thing. I would have a blast.
Yeah,
Someone would probably have to drag me off the set just like, okay, this person is a little too excited.
you probably
Yeah.
love the aging and dyeing shop. That I feel like that's definitely where you combine art and the medium of clothes. It's
Yeah.
like together.
Yeah. So what's an insider tell, I guess, the difference between a shoddy job and a smashing job?
Okay. For aging.
I mean, like aging and dying is one thing, but like even just like when you watch a film that you like that is going to win an Oscar, like what is it that makes them that and like a second rate thing?
Hmm. I think it maybe be the right level of noticing the clothes, right?
Mm.
When you notice them too much, for me, and obviously I'm in costume, so I'm looking at it really hard.
Mm.
Maybe it's because it doesn't belong, or like if it is very new, or if two people are wearing the same color, you're like, oh no, did anybody think about that? Because those are all things we try not to do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then for aging, I guess the big telltale would be like outlining.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier where your fingers like might touch your collar.
Mm.
Wouldn't age just right around the edge. You would do something like a snake, because that's really how you would touch something. It wouldn't just be aging the outline of something, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Whoa, it's just like the things that you never think about. Wow. So that's one thing for like aging and dying and like noticing things. How about on set? So what is something that somebody could do that would actually like really impress you? As in, I'm gonna hire you back. Like you could be my assistant.
Hmm. Okay. There's all these different positions. If you are wanting to be a designer, I think the best way to really learn from one is to follow one around. If you're assisting and you don't know what to do, just make sure you're always with that designer, like, because they're going to have an idea and they're going to be like, oh, it would be really great for this fitting and I don't have it in here. And, you got to be right there to know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
then you can be like, let me go look for it. It's just kind of being very close to whatever's happening, whatever's changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know sometimes when we start out, we don't know what to do, but I think being readily available and just like having that like hustle and good attitude goes so far. I see good hustle.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, they might be new, but I'll be like, I want them back,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you were talking about following around that costume designer, I know that there's a lot of, I don't know, there is a lot of etiquette when it comes to collaboration, like who is allowed to collaborate and who just needs to be silent. Um, like when you are following around that costume designer and she's like, oh, I wish I had this. Would there ever be a time when you could say, okay, we don't have that. I could go out and get it, but we have this. Like, what if we did this? Like, is that like acceptable collaboration or is that just leave that up to her?
Um, I think it depends on like who you're working with. I want that as a designer. we do have like a design team, like within our department, where I have an ACD or a key costumer, and we have a lot of those conversations.
ACD.
Assistant costume designer.
Got it.
Yeah. It's just a mouthful,
Yeah. No, I got it.
I got you. So there's a lot of talk on my team where we're like brainstorming or problem solving or coming up with solutions. And so me as a person, I don't mind. There might be other designers out there that might feel differently, or maybe they might want it from someone on their design team and maybe not, someone in a different area of costumes. The only time I don't like it, I'll say, is like, you have to know when you're in the presence of, like, if you're on set and you can't change something and you have to have a solution, I think you have to be very careful with what you suggest, because you're around others, and you might only have 10 minutes to fix something.
Yeah.
So like, you don't want a lot of loud suggestions that are not feasible,
Yeah.
You might just want to keep it contained.
Yeah.
And then have a like subtle, something you can do really quickly. If you're in the presence of an actor too, there's things that you don't want to get in their head, when they're focusing on their lines, or maybe they're having, like those little camera jitters, like you kind of got to protect their headspace too. So that comes into play.
How early in the process are you brought in?
Oh, normally.
Ideally,
I'm hired after the production designer. It does depend on the budget, right? For the movie. I've done some smaller budget films, indies, and the prep I had was like total of 3 weeks, which is insane. And, like 1 week being in Los Angeles and then maybe 2 on location.
Wow. Okay.
Those are really hard,
Yeah. Okay. So, we talk a lot about budget and pay on this podcast as well. So is this like a weekly rate, or is this like a project rate? How are things done in the costuming department?
Sure. For me now, being a designer, I'm pretty much a weekly rate.
Okay.
And but when I started out as a costumer, it's an hourly rate normally. For a costumer, we would bring them on during prep to pretty much start like getting the clothes ready to go into the costume truck, right? So like me as a designer would probably have already done the fittings with my design team.
Okay.
And then the costumers would get like a week of prep to prep your clothes to go in the costume truck for either the film or the TV show. And making sure you have everything on the truck, like that's comfort needs too. Like you have socks and you have to have undergarments. I know it's like things you would maybe think about because it's under the costume, and comfort shoes, warming coats, raincoats.
Wow, that comes from you guys. That's not like an actor's assistant making sure that they have the shoes to walk in.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. It normally comes from us.
Wow. Okay.
Set PAs help out, with the umbrellas, but I mean, I've been on shows where costumes provides the umbrellas too.
When you're talking about prepping the truck, is that like, I don't know, labeling? Like this is this character on this day, or are they just folding? I don't know.
Well, we have like our costume trucks. I mean, these are great questions. Who would know this, right? Yeah.
Right.
You've been on one. So they're pretty much, long bars, like 2 bars where you can hang clothes.
Yeah.
And within all of this hanging, you have characters' closets.
Okay.
Okay. And in their closets, I don't like to have, I mean, movies are different, but I don't like to have anything on the truck that's it hasn't been worn before, like, because I'm doing the prepping at the office. That's where I'm fitting them.
Okay.
So like, I want all of the things we haven't used yet for the next fitting, and then the next fitting. And then as they get selected and approved, they go to the truck, and then they get prepped the morning of, and then they go on the actor, and then they go back in the closet, because you're going to come back to that scene or that day later, because we don't shoot in order, or we might have an insert shot, and then you'll need what we've already shot. So that's kind of where it lives. And then we do label like those drawers, sock drawers, office supplies. We have shoe bags. We have garment bags. And then we also have a little bay area that is like today's work. And then in today's work, we would pull from all their closets, the costumes in the scene order that we're shooting. It would be like in that little area. So like your days of costumes, and the truck costumer would prep that.
Okay. Because or checking them back in or something. Because all right, I'm watching this Boy Meets World rewatch podcast. I'm going back to my nostalgia days, and I remember Will Friedle was talking about how they were meticulous with their costumes. He said that he had gotten tracked down way later after the wrap of the show for a sock that had gone missing, and I was just like, how meticulous are these situations? Are they that crazy?
I guess that sock was seen on camera. That's the only reason why we would need it back, right?
I guess. I have no idea. But that was like they were working with Disney, and they had their very specific things. Like they labeled all of them. I remember that Daniel Fishel, who played Topanga, she was talking about in a throwback episode that they had, she was wearing Lucille Ball's shoes. Like those were actually her shoes that she would wear. So, they've got quite a vault back there. So,
yeah, I'm sure they do.
So for someone who's entering into this field, for their expectations for pay, where could they go to get kind of a feel of the land, like what they could expect?
Sure. So different unions have different websites. And I first started off, I'll talk about the one in New Orleans, local 478.
Okay.
And it's good to know what the union rate is, even if you're going to do non-union shows, right? Because it's kind of like a good place to know where you could start negotiations. So if you could go to their website and look up the different rates. And I do think maybe, I could be getting this wrong, but like starting rate for costumers is somewhere like high 20s or low 30s an hour in that chapter, because
okay.
Yeah, because you have to think of cost of living is higher in Los Angeles, it's higher in New York. Those rates are going to be higher because of the cost of living. But so it's good to know wherever you are, wherever you're located, that if there's a local chapter, if it's a major city, bet you there is one, and you can go to their website and find out their scale rates. It's called scale, like the starting level of payment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So
I did that. I think I Googled that when I was like going into costumes. I was like, what do costume designers make? It's all over the place.
Yeah. That's what I would be Googling. I would have no idea. Now I'm going to be asking you. So for, you were talking about different guilds and unions, and I'm curious what would it take to get into your particular guild or union? Is it a union or is it a guild? Is it the same thing?
It's both. Well, ours is both, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's called the guild. It's still a union though.
Okay.
Okay. I don't really know why. But yeah.
Okay.
To get in the costume designer guild, you have to have credit as an illustrator, an assistant costume designer.
Illustrator. Like
costume illustrator.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just like illustration as in like Adobe Illustrator.
Yeah, there's digital costume illustrators out there.
Wow, okay.
They're part of the design guild because they work so closely with a designer to get these illustrations done, which a lot of time, like when you're making something, the actual design, the stuff we were talking about earlier, you will have to get an image or an idea or an illustration approved before you start the construction of it. And that's really closely with a costume illustrator.
Okay. I get what you're saying now. This is such a new world to me that I'm like Illustrator, like Adobe Illustrator.
I know. They have really cool jobs. They pretty much draw for a living,
Yeah. I wonder if like animators.
There's some crossover. Yeah, there is some crossover for I know some different costume illustrators that do concept art, as well.
Nice.
So there's a lot of crossover with that.
Nice. So I interrupted you. So illustrating, you start off, you have to have so many hours illustrating and
But I think it's like a couple of projects where you have that title,
mm-hmm,
costume illustrator, assistant costume designer, or designer. And it could be, I know for the Guild, it could be a music video, it
mm-hmm,
could be commercial. It
mm-hmm,
does have to be union work, I believe. Music video, commercial, or film, and or
mm-hmm.
TV. So I got in on a small movie. It was union, but I was not even in Los Angeles. I, got my requirements when I was living in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied over there with the intention of moving over there.
Got it. Got it.
Mhm.
So we had someone in G&E here that was talking about like the dues for it, and it was like a good 7 to 12K, like the dues to get into the Guild or the Union. Is wardrobe kind of in that same?
It is.
Yeah, it
I remember,
is.
I remember I had to like borrow money from my sister to join the guild. It was kind of
Dude,
like
that's rough.
going all in on yourself. You're like, okay, I'm just going to risk it. I'm just going to take that chance. Just
Yeah.
because you join a guild doesn't mean you're going to get work from it.
Right.
It
Right.
just means that you're allowed to work on union shows in
Mm-hmm.
that title that you have.
Right.
Um,
So I don't know. Take me back to once you actually had that status. You were in the guild slash union. You had paid your dues. Now it comes to finding those gigs. Did you find that easier? How was that process of going from like, okay, I'm here, I'm new,
mhm.
to actually being comfortable within these new walls?
Right. Well, I knew it was a risk, even from just like borrowing money from my sister. And then I went out to LA to well, before I moved there, I was like, let me see if I could get work. And, I'd saved up some money to stay out there for a bit. And so I was already a costumer
Mm-hmm,
in a union, but I wanted to grow.
mm-hmm,
And I kind of felt like if I didn't go out to LA to try to work as an assistant costume designers for, big time designers where I'm going to learn a lot. Like, I don't know if I'm ever going to achieve that in my small pond. I wasn't sure.
yeah,
And plus, it was at the time when a lot of films were leaving New Orleans because
yeah,
the incentive was capped.
mm,
So I'm back in LA, and what my strategy was, and you remember, like I mentioned, hustle.
mm,
I really made a list of every single costume designer I had worked with in New Orleans that was from Los Angeles that I felt like I had a good rapport with,
mm,
and just text them and was like, can I buy you coffee? Can I buy you lunch?
mm-hmm.
And this was like maybe even 6 years for me, not even speaking to a person, but I just was like, what's the worst thing they could say?
Yeah,
Probably nothing,
yeah, yeah.
And I did actually like kind of rekindle a lot of those relationships. And
Mm,
then I just let everybody know that I was there and that I could work as an assistant designer. But when you're new, that's a big position to be in control of, because you're
yeah,
kind of like co-captain of a ship, and
yeah.
it's hard to start out. So like I was like, or I could be an additional assistant designer, which
Mm-hmm,
is kind of like extra help.
mm-hmm.
So I got hired as an additional assistant designer for some of the American Horror Stories because I had worked with that designer in New Orleans,
Gotcha.
and that really helped.
Yeah,
And then that was out on the Fox lot,
yeah.
and then I worked with them and their shopper, and then their shopper would take me to the other costume houses, take me to the fabric stores,
Mm.
and that kind of started to help me get my bearings for working in Los Angeles.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where do people who don't necessarily have those like 6-year-old
Mhm.
kind of connections, where do people find other costume designers or resources? Like Twitter's huge for screenwriting communities, but how about for the fashion wardrobe costuming department?
Sure. I think social media is a great place.
Mm,
When I was just trying to become a baby costumer in New Orleans,
mm,
that designer that I worked with in Los Angeles, I messaged her on Facebook before she came to New Orleans, and, was like, so impressed with your career. I'd love
mhm.
the opportunity to work with you and learn from you.
Yeah.
And then eventually I did work with her. You know, I don't
Nice.
know if it was from that message or if it
Well,
was,
that started it for sure. It wasn't going to
yeah.
happen without
But
it.
I get messages from, you know, young people interested in costumes, maybe getting out of college.
Yeah.
And I might not get back to them right away, depending on what's going on with work, if I'm swamped, but I really do try to message everybody back
Yeah.
and give them pointers on how to get in. And basically, you got to start as a PA is the best way to do it. But like,
Nice.
how do you get those jobs? Well, you got to
Exactly.
find out who you want to work with and find a way to contact them.
Nice. So, okay. Now we're going to ask about the tools of your trade. You
Okay,
did mention an airbrusher,
that's true.
but maybe I'll make that off limit, so you have to pick something else.
Okay,
No, so what gear or gadget is a good old reliable? It's always there for you.
measuring tape.
Got it. Okay. Is there a particularly good one that you like, or does it not matter?
A retractable one.
Okay.
Tiny scissors.
Gotcha. Now I remember my mom getting me scissors once, and she's a seamstress, and so
Okay.
she would always sew our stuff when we were kids and stuff like that. I mean, nothing like huge, like big time, but I remember she got me like Singer scissors, and I think when I was young, she caught me cutting paper with it.
Uh-oh.
Don't you ever? Oh
Yeah,
my
those are
gosh.
good scissors. I know where she's coming from.
Yeah, apparently paper is bad for scissors.
Yeah.
So, all right. What about your new favorite gadget? The something that revolutionizes how you work, or
Oh,
your favorite industry related new purchase.
right. So there's this company called Sync on Set. I don't know if you've heard of them or not,
No.
but they're pretty much like um an app or like a website that helps you track continuity.
Ooh.
And it starts from like breaking down a script. That's where it starts with. And that's like we have to always break down a script in the beginning to know
Okay.
like how many changes a character has, and then know like how many scenes these characters are in with these characters. And so Sync on Set's a really easy way to break down a script, and it saves a lot of time and also track continuity. However, you do have to pay for it. So
Yeah.
if you're starting out, and I've done this a lot on short films and smaller projects,
Mm-hmm.
you can use Sync on Set for free for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So like there is a way to still use it for smaller projects.
Okay.
And I like to even do a breakdown before an interview
Okay.
for a job, because it really helps me know the scope of the project, like how many costumes in like the entire project,
Mm-hmm.
and then let's say I get hired and then I have to talk about crew and budget with the producers.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know those things before I have those conversations. So that's
Yeah.
why I like that program a lot.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
I always have like, I'll just show you
Oh yeah, that's great.
a Bible. Well, in here, this is TV, so I'll have like at least 4 or 5 scripts for episodes.
Mm.
I'm always prepping one and I'm always shooting one, but then I might like to have the episode before because of reshoots or inserts, and
Okay.
then the one coming up. But even on a film, I'll have the script, I'll have the breakdown in here. On a play, I did a play. What I had instead of a breakdown, I had every actor's headshot, so I could see like their complexion when I was pulling their costumes, and I had their measurements, and it was like a cast of 40. So I like
Wow.
all their info in here.
Wow.
So that's
Wow.
something, I mean, it changes for the job. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
new, but like it's still my way of kind of staying organized.
Yeah. You said 40 people. Is that a lot, or would you say that like okay. Oh, I just recently saw was it 30 is it 36 steps? It was a show where 4 cast members played over 150 characters.
Yeah,
So there are lots of costume changes.
yeah, sounds like it.
But what I don't know. I think when you look at a job, if you see something like 80 or if you see something like 5 or 20, like what's typical for, I don't know, say even a commercial, what's typical?
Uh, 12, maybe 12 cast in a commercial.
Okay.
It
All
kind
right.
of,
Okay. So one of my favorite questions to ask is a significant oh no moment where something went wrong,
oh yeah.
massively wrong. How did you fix it?
Okay. I got a story.
Okay. Yes.
Um, I'll leave names out,
Good.
but it was my first week of shooting on a new job. And, I get all the costumes approved, which means I try them on the actors
Yeah.
before I get them approved.
Yeah.
And that time when I try it on the actors is usually like our safe place to where I find out if they like something or they don't like something.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to ever push to put something an actor doesn't like on them because like it would affect the performance and your relationship with them. So you have to live in this world of pleasing everybody.
Yeah.
So that had already happened. So you think you're doing good. You have like all your costumes prepped. I'm just on the truck to make sure everything goes okay because then they're going to be on set soon.
Yeah.
And then the actress like walks in on the truck crying that she did not like the dress and didn't remember trying it on. And, I'd already gotten approved by like producers and directors before this moment. And it's going to be shooting in like, I think like 20 minutes. It's supposed to be on camera.
Oof.
Right. And I
Yeah.
can't just like change something without getting it approved because it's like for network TV.
Right.
So I just was like, okay, let's look in the mirror together. Like, I want to know what it is that makes you feel this way. I want to know what about this dress that you don't like, and then like part of the neckline. So she like opened up the button and she was like, this is not so bad here. But then it was like the rest of the dress at Empire Waist was like hiding her figure. Mostly that was part of the problem. And you have to just think quickly. And I was like, what if it was a top? What if it was just like a top with a little peplum and you wear with jeans? And she immediately was like, I would love it. I would love it if it was because the problem was gone. You could see her shape. And she was like, can you do that? And I was like, yep, I think we can make it happen. So I was like, just give me 15 minutes, and she left the trailer and I had to put the dress on the ground because it's the only way I could cut a straight line. And it was a big circle skirt. And we just went for it. I was just like, somebody thread the machine, somebody get the iron ready. And then it was a team effort for sure. But
Dang.
it was on camera in like 15 minutes, and then
my gosh. And she loved it.
She did. And then in the meantime, I had to email the showrunner and just be like, so-and-so didn't like the dress. My solution is to make it a top. Do you approve? I had to make it quick,
Yeah.
And then they just wrote back approved because everybody knows that like getting something on camera is pretty important. And it was still keeping the color the same, neckline was still the same.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to affect like her in the scene with other people and their colors.
Yeah.
So it was just like,
mercy. And the showrunner actually was there to reply. That's awesome too.
Yeah, that particular job, they were always on it and answered like lightning fast.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think that's a level of creativity that I think is like the problem solving, I think is a lot of fun. I love those types of that. You got 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You got a solution and you're not entertaining ideas like, well, do we get another dress? Do we have to like stop things, like switch scenes or, what have you? Like you got it and you got it done. That's amazing.
It was a small victory for sure. And then, like the AD's outside and was like, what do I tell the line producer? Because he's like, we didn't hold up camera, but they just want to know what's going on. I was like, just tell them we had a project runway moment and it's handled,
Yes. Tell them that the boss handled it. Okay, so we have some listener questions from our Insta at Practical Filmmaker. I post upcoming guests in the story so you can ask them questions. This one comes from Michaela Hounslow in Tennessee. When unspecified, how do you weave a person's personality or story into designs?
Okay. So when unspecified, meaning there's not like clues in the script.
Yeah.
I would probably think about the characters that they're around.
Mm.
And I'd make up my own story then. It'd have to be like, well, she's here for a reason, or he or they. And I'd have to probably make up my own story a little bit. But then, I still have to dress the scene cohesively. So then it whatever the other characters are wearing would also affect how I would dress this character.
Gotcha. So, and this one comes from Rachel Rocca in Michigan. I'd love to know your top places to get unusual fabric and materials. Where do the pros shop, or are they hunting online in bigger cities and around hardware stores?
There's this place in Los Angeles called Rag Finders,
Ooh.
downtown LA.
Do they ship?
I don't know. I don't know if they ship, but that this is like a place that has like old runs of fabric that you can't find anymore.
Ooh.
And it's huge.
Ooh.
You just never know what you're going to find there. And you go down in this basement, there's like a room attached to a room, and it's just like a maze of fabric. That place I think is pretty unique. Mood Fabrics, you can shop online. Mood always has really great fabrics. I do love to thrift too. I will take fabric from an existing garment if I'm in love with it and change it into something else.
Nice. She also wanted to know, what's your recommendation for sewing forms brand type, most versatility or quality? Sewing forms in general, not necessarily just for women or dresses.
I like the forms that have collapsible shoulders personally.
Okay.
Because, when you're making something fitted on a person, they have to be able to get in and out of it. And when we get dressed as people, we put our arms up and it makes us slimmer through here. Yeah. So unless the form can do that, you're kind of like not going to get a great idea of like, can they squeeze into this or not,
Yeah. Interesting. Is there a particular brand that you like to work with?
I don't have a brand for that. I've had a few different ones over the years.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. How do people find you or follow your work? Shameless plug out.
Oh, sure. I'm on Instagram as Heathcock Costume Designer. And then, I'm on Facebook too, just Ashley Heathcock. And I have a website, ashleyheathcock.com. You could send me a message from my website too. I get those.
And the one question that I always wrap up with, what question should I have asked you?
Oh, I don't know. I'm thankful that people want to learn more about this job. It is hard. And I will say that because of the hours. Most people in this industry work minimum 12-hour days. And the length of time that you're at work and maybe not at home with your family can be tough.
That is something that we talk a lot about as well. Just like the practicality of a lifestyle and how it fits in with, because like old Hollywood, it was just like, well, we're going to run you over and, like if you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen kind of a thing. But there has been a bit of a shift and balance and boundaries. And, we talk about healthy boundaries a lot on this as well. Can you think of a time where, for your own good, you said no?
Oh, it might not have been for my own good. But I will say no if I feel like something's unsafe. Sometimes, you have to go with safety over aesthetics if it's for a stunt actor, like maybe the shoes don't match, and that's fine because they need to be in those shoes because it's safer. I think that's when it's perfectly a good time to say no. And then also us as filmmakers and TV showmakers, we go into a lot of locations, to shoot exteriors, that might be like a protected area or like a national forest. And you just got to make sure that like we're not leaving a big footprint there, what we're doing can't be more important than the space we're in.
Absolutely.
I have seen someone, in a situation where like the frogs were loud and we were out in the middle of nowhere. Someone asked locations to kill the frogs. And I piped up pretty big about that. This was a long time ago. And then it stopped, but I couldn't believe it,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pretty sure this is illegal,
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's tough to say no. I mean, I might I don't know if everybody does this, but like if I'm being asked to change something last minute, now I understand there's sometimes it's necessary, but if it's really not necessary and what it's going to take to do that, people skipping meals or people working overtime or all night, they'd have to work all night to make it happen.
Yeah.
And, it's not like we have a night crew, we have one
Yeah.
girl. I won't necessarily flat out be like, no, but I'll be like, do you know what you're asking? Do you know what the effects are? And like, I will kind of lay it out, because how would you know, how would you know how the clothes wind up on actors? You wouldn't know that someone, sewed on that garment 8 hours already,
Mercy. Let me inform you. Thank you so much. This has been such a fascinating conversation.
Thanks so much for the podcast and inviting me to be on.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I think this is amazing. And like, we've gotten a whole, this has started. This has opened the door to more wardrobe style. I don't know if I even have those terms right.
All of it. We're all of those things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. And thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this interview, follow us right here and on Instagram. Ask us questions and check out more episodes at thepracticalfilmmaker.com. Be well and God bless. We'll see you next time on The Practical Filmmaker.